Microphone test. Microphone test. Getting chat set up, and there we go. I think that will do for this. And once again, you join me in this new Minecraft world that I am live streaming. Today may be a shorter live stream than the stream that there was yesterday. Or not yesterday, what am I talking about? My fucking time traveller. But every day in this Minecraft world is going to be progress, as there is going to be a lot of things that need to be done for in this world to get it to the stage that I am gonna start showing my ideas for this world and things like that. My kind of main idea and goal for this world is to be a very kind of technologically advanced kind of region of kind of interconnected cities, I guess, kind of like Pokemon world or something like that, if you would. Guess that's kind of a root of my inspiration for this world. So today, not sure how long this stream will be. It's basically just going to be more resources gathering and finishing up the starter house that I am making here, which will just be very simple at the end of the day, not going for anything ultra flash or anything like that. One of the next things that I want to do in this world, let's see, is just basically get together a load of resources and eventually make or quite soon make a cobblestone and tree farm, automatic ones, because those are going to be two very valuable resources whenever it comes to this world, as they are very easy to farm resources. And with how I've planned out this world and the main base that I'll be building for this world in a test world, is that I have used wood as the kind of base plate for the building and what have you, if that is the base, which will eventually, when we get to it, be basically a 3 long and 4 tall grid of chunks. So 12 chunks total in the spawn chunks I will be making my base in, and eventually that will span out to more areas nearby, but the base being in the spawn chunks is going to be quite important for me at the end of the day, because I'm going to be going to lots of different areas in this world, whatever areas there may be, and explore them and build interconnected parts of the city, that, or kind of region of cities that I mentioned. In terms of things that I will be building specifically in the city, one of the things that I do have a mod for installed in this mod pack I play, which is a modified version of Exuminati, which I'll actually mention why that is in a moment, is the Applied Energistics mod, or the one with what's it called, the ME storage system, if that's what it's called, where you build like a big computer and what have you, have very expensive parts and what have you, which can do crafting and a whole bunch of storage and stuff like that for you. I get why those are popular and why people use them, but it is not what I will be going for in this world. And obviously, since there is the disadvantage of not having an ME auto crafting system, I will have to figure out ways around that, of how to craft things automatically, which I have figured out and started to consolidate my ideas together for that kind of stuff. As I said, the world here is going to be very technologically advanced whenever it comes to that in the world. And I feel like having all sorts of redstone shops and things like that in the world, and redstone auto crafting machines, will kind of add to the technological feel of the world and the kind of overall lore that I want to put across and deliver in this world at the same time as well. So the one thing that I mentioned just there that I said I was going to talk about was the mod pack I am using. I don't really watch Minecraft YouTubers anymore, but back when I did, one of the Minecraft YouTubers I did watch quite a bit was Exuma, and as people will know, he did release his own mod pack, which is Exuminati. Now, for a long time, the computer I played Minecraft on couldn't get connected to the internet, and with what that meant was that I was unable to play vanilla Minecraft as the as it wouldn't let me log in without the internet for some reason. I can't remember the specifics why, but with the Minecraft AT launcher, I had 2 mod packs to it already installed and what have you, which was Sky Factory and Exuminati. Those ones I could safely log into and play till my heart's content. Play till my heart is consent. That is a very strange sentence. Play until my heart was content. There we go. I finally said it right. I could easily log into those and play those fine. Only catch was that the only mod pack in that world or setup that I had at that time that was able to generate natural land was the Exuminati mod, because the Sky Factory mod was specifically programmed and designed so it only spawned you in the void, because it's like a kind of a skyblock type mod, which is fair enough. But at the same time, in part because of that, Exuminati was not up to, I guess you could say, my caliber of what I was used to playing modded Minecraft with before my internet troubles and what have you with that computer specifically. So what I did was I basically just augmented my installations of Exuminati and filled it with mods and brought it up to a kind of speed of my doing and what I am used to with modded Minecraft. Obviously I haven't redistributed it or tried to make money out of it. I'm not stupid or anything like that. It's just one thing that I've done and how I've set up this Minecraft pack for myself, and it's worked out really well, and I've made, and over that time of having those internet problems and eventually getting a new computer and what have you to do streaming on, over the years I was able to create some test worlds and other worlds that over those couple years that I was able to basically lay down the ideas for and kind of plan out what I will be doing in this live stream series. Which is very handy because I'll be quite up to speed and kind of know where I'm at and able to not be faffing around trying to figure out a lot of things on the dot. Obviously there's going to be a point where I will exceed that, and there will be a point where I will be start figuring out things on stream itself. But the likes of my base and things like that, I have like 75% built already, and I'm very happy with how it is and what have you. But it's going to take its time to get to the point where it's been built and what have you, obviously, and all of the ideas and what have you for this series that I want to show will kind of come across on. But hopefully I will kind of start building, or I will be starting to build things concurrently to the construction of the base, so it's not all about my base and what have you. And people can see other things of my world coming together on top of the base coming together at the same time, which will be quite the project, figuring out spawn chunks and things like that, which will require a lot of deaths and what have you. But I'm really happy with what I have planned for this world so far, and I'm very happy with how it is kind of all coming along and all coming together. And as I said, and trying to loop back into something I said earlier and something I want to try and expand upon, I won't be using applied energistics for the storage of my world, because it's big and it's expensive. And we'll figure out, and have figured out, another way, kind of kind of figured out a way around it. And in turn, a lot of some of the auto crafting will be relegated to shops and what have you that I will make for this world, and will kind of add to the overall goal and feel of this world that I am making here. And I've forgotten to change my title on Twitch. 1 second here. If we do... Just change the title real quick. On Twitch, that is. That's fine. There we go, that is all up to date and to speed. But yes, I'm very happy with those machines I've been designing in my test world and what have you, and hopefully, or on my YouTube channel, in which I'm doing these broadcasts simultaneously too, also called Haunted Mind, I will be doing tutorials for them, and kind of further showcasing my kind of ideas for this world, and putting more content out there on that channel. And yeah, hopefully, and hope to do that in the next couple of weeks. And I've planned quite a few of these devices out. With it being quite a technologically advanced world, I'm going to make use of the computer craft mod. Why is this all lit? It's weird. To kind of have those as decoration and what have you. And I have designed certain machines and what have you that will auto craft them and will allow somebody in the world to purchase them with currency and what have you, which is really cool, and I'm very happy with how they have turned out, and I will be doing some YouTube videos on showing those off at some point soon in the next couple weeks. But yes, it's down here. Grab this real quick. But if you know me outside of this or have watched my other YouTube channels and what have you, I'm going to take this little guy on. You will know I'm really into the paranormal and kind of supernatural horror and things like that generally. I've always had a big interest in the supernatural and kind of ghost stories and things of that nature. And even to this day, I still thoroughly enjoy watching and researching and kind of, well, watching and kind of reading about the paranormal. I guess it is a bit of researching in a sense. It's just a subject that I find so fascinating and interesting. And obviously in the real world, the paranormal is a kind of subject that has been around for many years now and centuries at this point, and only makes sense that it does, because with religion being such a huge thing in the world, it only makes sense for something like this to be kind of discussed and out there as well, since both are so intrinsically tied to spirituality. But yes, it is something that's always fascinated me for most of my life, for pretty much all of it, from what I can remember. Let's go back this way. That's where I want to go. And I thoroughly enjoy watching various YouTube videos and reading books about it and what have you. And I do thoroughly enjoy watching Nuke's top 5s, even though from what recent videos I've seen of him, I haven't seen the most recent ones, I think has been slightly off in that there's not as, sometimes there isn't a lot of ghost stuff in them, and the nature of the clips as well sometimes can be quite questionable as well, like obviously could be fakes and what have you. Like with the whole thing about ghosts and what have you, the whole, like anybody could easily fake a ghost clip on YouTube, and with it all kind of getting better and better with technology and what have you, it's only going to be a matter of time till you're not going to be able to distinguish anymore what a real ghost video is or what have you, which is always good to have in the back of your mind, as it's always good to approach these topics with skepticism, I would have said. So, and that's the thing, at the end of the day, the subject matter and what have you is very powerful and interesting to me in the way that I know that these top 5 videos could be faked, but I find the subject matter so interesting and the kind of stories around them so interesting to the point where it almost kind of doesn't matter for me, in a sense. Like, I do try and, I guess you could say, think that they are real in order to kind of fully entertain myself and what have you with these videos. But obviously at the same time, in the back of my head, I do have that kind of skeptical side to me, and that kind of side to me that is going to kind of question what I am watching and what have you, if it's real or not. But at the end of the day, the subject matter is so kind of powerful and interesting to me that it just kind of makes those videos interesting for me to watch. And I've done that for several years now and have an extensive playlist on one of my YouTube channels, which I will actually link and share, or not link and share, but display on my YouTube channel for this project, the Haunted Mind YouTube channel. I'll display that playlist there, and where you can find all of the kind of ghost videos I have watched over the years. I think there's over 600 videos in it, or something like that. Really built up a lot of stuff in it over time and over the years that I have kind of been watching these kinds of videos. Let's see, just trying to think what to put here. Any more logs? Yes. Do that. And today I did add a few more things to it and what have you, because I did watch one thing to do with the paranormal today, and that was several clips and documentary pieces about the true events of the Amityville haunting, which is one of the most famous and interesting one of the most famous and well-known pieces of apparent real supernatural happenings out there, alongside the likes of the events at Borley Rectory and the Enfield haunting, or Enfield poltergeist, whatever you would like to call it. Let's see. So, okay, still, yeah. First thing I watched about it, which was earlier today, was a kind of History Channel documentary on it, which I have on DVD because that's the kind of person I am. And it was a very good documentary on it overall, but with having watched all of these bits and pieces to do with it today, it has made me entertained but also fairly skeptical of the whole thing at the same time, because it's one of those ones where there's so many reports of what's happened in what supposedly happened, that it makes you think, okay, we have pretty much everything under the sun here, all of the classic traits and what have you of hauntings and what have you. We've got phantom noises, we have stains manifesting, odd smells. We've got the people experiencing extreme temperature fluctuations. We've had people see a pig demon and things like that, and it's just so much stuff to it and what have you, that it really does start to make you think, okay, how much of this is actually true and how much of this isn't true, because there's so much going on here that all of it can't be true, right, kind of thing happening to it, or in this kind of scenario. But overall, despite these kind of, I guess you could punnily say, premonitions that I had about it and what have you, I was still thoroughly entertained by the documentary and the clips that I watched on YouTube. Take one of those. I think I can sit. The basic story behind Amityville was that in 1974, in the Amityville house, which is somewhere in Long Island, Maine, America, I believe, this family was a troubled family, and there was lots of disagreements and fighting and what have you with the family, and eventually one of the members of the family ended up killing the other 6 of them in a very famous and notorious massacre for the area. And there's all sorts of debates and what have you to it and what have you, like how much of it was real in terms of what they experienced in terms of paranormal activities and things like that, and actual motivation for the murderer and what have you. I ended up watching that documentary, as I mentioned, and several other bits and pieces on YouTube today in regards to this subject matter, namely the Tops 5 video on Amityville, a section on the subject matter within a Wendigoon video titled The True Stories of the Warren Hauntings, and was that all that I watched? Not quite. Well, in terms of the documentary clips and what have you, that was all that I watched in terms of it, but I did watch other bits and pieces on YouTube and what have you, as I will get into. Actually, I've got some already. Do that. But the motivations for the killings and what have you, that is what Amityville House became partially known for at the time, is kind of disputed and has been disputed over the years and what have you, and there's a lot of different mysteries to it still to this day that are unanswerable or have not had a definitive answer to. The most likely one, as posed by, I think, Wendigoon in his video on that particular section, was that the perpetrator was mentally unstable and see, was in fact indeed mentally unstable, as there had been proof and documentation that he had previously been to psychiatric care facilities and what have you. So if it's debated as if he is actually insane, or if there was another motivation for the atrocities committed by him. From my understanding and from what I have collected in terms of information and what have you about this subject matter over today, he has changed the story a few times over the years and may or may not still be alive. He could be dead by now, but if so, he's only recently passed away, this being in the last decade. One such thing was that he was being possessed by a devil or demon or something like that, was one of his stories. And I believe at this point the family, the Defoe family, did experience paranormal things and what have you in the home, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I think out of the 3 sources of information that I used and watched on this matter today, only I think one of them stated that there was paranormal phenomena experienced by them or that particular family at this stage in the kind of Amityville story. But it's been heavily debated over the years as to if this guy was actually insane or if there was some other explanation to the motivation for the killings and what have you, whether it be supernatural or things like that. But most likely, as I think it was Wendigoon pointed out, the guy was most likely just a nutcase and just killed his family because of his own mental issues. And I think it was in the History Channel documentary that I watched that there was discussions and things brought up about him pertaining to the night that it happened and what ended up motivating him to do these things. And all sorts of interesting things in that were kind of brought up in correlation to this, like with the Defoe murderer. It was one shot describing at one point that a pair of black hands or kind of a shadow figure gave him the gun, and when he started he couldn't stop and things like that. So on that one side or lens of the story, it really does seem like that he was possessed by something and in turn just went on a rampage and just went psychotic basically. But obviously it's, given the guy's background and what have you, I think it's likely to say that this part of the story isn't true. It's most likely that he was just crazy and off the family through his own unstable mental psychosis, if that is the best way of putting it. But a lot of when the paranormal stuff creeps in and what have you is with whenever the house was cleared out and what have you, a second family known as the Lutzes moved into the place, and that there is when the paranormal thing started really kicking off and started heavily being documented from my interpretation and knowledge of the whole subject matter. It's a nice cluster of redstone. And there's all sorts of interesting paranormal things brought up during this phase and section of the story of the Amityville haunting and what have you. But as I said, or kind of alluded to at the start, there's so much to it that it's really questionable, like in terms of the level of what's happening, like how much of it is true, how much of this is fake, etc, etc. But as I kind of also hinted at, it's kind of has a kind of a tick box of almost every paranormal haunted house trope you can think of and what have you. If you can think of it, you can throw it at this case and it will most likely pop up there somewhere. Whether it be them hearing phantom noises, temperature fluctuations, things of that nature. And there's even a weird one where the Mr. Lutz, the father, saw oozing of this some weird liquid on the wall and what have you. And there's another interesting thing as well, is where Mrs. Lutz at one point went down to the basement of the house, tried to move this bookshelf and what have you that could obviously be moved, and behind that she found a hidden room which was painted in red, which is quite interesting and what have you, because just where my brain is going, I know that the science fiction author H.G. Wells did a few ghost stories as well as the likes of his famous science fiction novels, and one of them was called The Red Room, I believe. So that's an interesting little other side thing that I know and kind of can bring up in this subject matter. Why am I on easy? There we go. That's probably because I've been mucking around in the test world. See. But yeah, all sorts of interesting paranormal phenomenon happened at the time of the Lutzes being in the house, and let's do that. They only ended up spending 28 days in the house total. And in the History Channel documentary is in which the Lutzes themselves are actually interviewed as a part of the documentary. They refuse to say what happened on the final night of them staying there and what eventually caused them to pack up and leave the very next day. But then in the top fives video I watched on Amityville, there is a description of what actually happened the night before they left. Or maybe it was on the night they left. Maybe that happened and then they left in the process or fallout of this particular event happening. But basically, Mr. Lutz was wide awake, and from what the Tops 5 video says his wife, who was lying in bed next to him, started levitating. Their dog, called Harry, was in the room with them at the time. Apparently it started doing circles and vomiting on the floor, apparently. And Mr. Lutz could also hear the sounds of their children's beds being rattled and what have you as well. And it was at that point that they just decided to pack up and go, which I find really odd that for an official kind of television made documentary for the History Channel, they refused to give an account as to what happened that final night and what caused them to leave. I don't quite understand that in terms of why that happened, and now here Tops 5 channel is able to give an account as to what actually happened that night. So did they at some point after the History Channel documentary give an account as to what actually happened? It's always that found in some book that they disclosed this information to in terms of the author, and then Tops 5 was able to find that book and then what am I trying to say? Was able to put that information into their video. Point being, I just find it a really weird inconsistency and odd discrepancy about it and what have you. Overall, which there is more of, and I will get into. But all sorts of other interesting stories can be brought up and what have you in regards to what the paranormal phenomena was that the Lutz family did experience in the home. Like their daughter, Melissa, or Missy, I think they nicknamed, I think that was her name, Melissa, started having an imaginary friend, and this is per the documentary, the History Channel one. I already put the letter there, I'm so in the zone that I forgot about that already. And then they started seeing these weird kind of red eyes and what have you in various places in the home. Like they were outside at one point in their garden or near kind of a boating area they had out the back, I believe, and then Mr. Lutz looks up and sees red eyes looking at him from a window, or what he described as was a pig face with red eyes looking back at him. And this was kind of a frequent thing brought up with these hauntings and what have you. The Amityville hauntings, from the various information sources that I watched, is that there's often the stories detailed of how they saw this kind of pig-like figure with glowing red eyes and what have you, which is what in the History Channel documentary is described as Melissa's imaginary friend. And I find it interesting that an animal figure and what have you is kind of one of the things they saw in quotation marks, because in demonology, and I think demonology and Satanism and other kind of aspects of the supernatural, animals do feature quite prevalently, like mainly with satanistic sacrifices and stuff like that. Animals are often used, and I don't know what significance it has specifically, but I do see goats get thrown around a lot, possibly metaphorically and literally speaking, in these kind of worlds of dark occult rituals and what have you. So the fact that it was some type of animal demon, as it were, let's put it like that, it could very well be that it was indeed some kind of demon that they were being harassed by, for lack of a better term, which I find really interesting. But at the same time, there is again more conflicting information and what have you in my information sources. Like in the History Channel documentary, it is described that the demon appeared to other members of the family after Melissa started having an imaginary friend, which so happened to be this demon figure, demon in quotation marks. But then in the Wendigoon video and in his recounting of the story, and with what information he was able to find and gather, he says that the opposite, in that the demon appeared first and then Melissa started having an imaginary friend, which is not how it is per the History Channel documentary. And if there was a mention to it in the Tops 5 video, I'm not 100% sure, and I make no mention of it in my notes that I have next to me at the moment. It's also described more kind of leniency to it being a satanic figure is in the Wendigoon video, in which it is described that there were cloven footprints as seen in the snow. That there were cloven footprints seen in the snow, which would also kind of add to the idea of some kind of animal demon and what have you. And is, I guess, another angle and aspect to the Pigman story of the Amityville haunting. But interestingly enough, in the History Channel documentary, the footprints in the snow does get mentioned, but it is not mentioned as the being cloven for some reason. And it is pretty amazing what Wendigoon was able to put forward and describe in their section in their video on the Warren hauntings and what have you, or what hauntings the Warrens did investigate and what have you in regards to the Amityville haunting and what have you. And there's some pretty crazy stuff in it and what have you that I'm like, okay, did this really happen. I'm finding this a bit hard to believe, kind of like on the level of the Omen level of behind the scenes disasters and what have you, like somebody crashing their car outside a town named Omen at 66.6 miles per hour is one of the behind the scenes stories of that movie that sticks out in my head and what have you. But again, like, that's another kind of fairly ridiculous one that does sound too good to be true. I should have just said that earlier, too good to be true. But guess I wasn't thinking of that at the time. Like, it is detailed that there was contact made to the Lutzes and what have you for there to be a book written about the haunting and what have you. And then Wendigoon apparently goes on to make mention of the fact that the writer of the book ended up getting a manuscript for it, only for the car that the manuscript was in to explode and catch on fire, apparently. And then there's another story following suit to this in a completely different car with a completely different person driving it, I think, where the manuscript was in it as well. Manuscript for the book. This is, if I didn't mention that, which I probably did. That car in particular suffered a mechanical failure in the steering, and the car veers off the road into a lake. And I think no, it wasn't in that one it's coming up what I was thinking of, but somehow both of those happen with a manuscript of the book in the car, and both times the book's manuscript survives somehow, apparently, according to these stories as presented by Wendigoon. Then capping off this kind of trilogy of weird things happening with the manuscript of the book based on the hauntings and what have you. There is another story Wendigoon gives which kind of culminates as a trilogy of weird stories here, saying that the manuscript was sitting in the home of somebody and what have you, and that house apparently catched on fire and what have you, and unfortunately killed the person or the occupant that was in the house at the time, sadly. But it's stuff like that are so kind of ridiculous and what have you, kind of makes you think, is this real, or is somebody kind of fabricating events and what have you here for more credibility and things like that. Be right back. And I am back, just checking that I'm muted. It did, all good. Still new to this. But whereas Wendigoon did a fantastic kind of section on the Amityville haunting and what have you, and the kind of whole thing about it, and I'm sure he obviously had good intentions. I mean, his channel's massive and has all sorts of fantastic bits of horror to it and what have you. Like, I loved his video on the disturbing movie Iceberg that he did. I thought that was a particularly brilliant video of his. So I'm sure he had all good intentions and what have you, but it just goes to show at the end of the day there is so much kind of conflicting information out there and what have you about the Amityville stuff, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. But one interesting thing that he goes into, that the documentary, I think the History Channel documentary that is only lightly detailed in its proceedings, was the involvement of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the investigation of the Amityville haunting and what have you, or the investigation of the Amityville house rather, made them kind of household paranormal names. And if you are watching this live stream and are familiar with horror movies or are a fan of horror movies and what have you, they may ring a bell, Ed and Lorraine Warren, because it was their investigation of the Enfield poltergeist that was the basis for the second Conjuring movie, I believe, and I think they appear in maybe other movies of that franchise. I don't know. I'm not really familiar with the Conjuring universe franchise of films. It's something I haven't greatly explored. I really liked the first movie. I thought that was great, but I was kind of lukewarm on the second, and I haven't really gone out of my way to explore more of the franchise, and I have heard of mixed things about the franchise overall. And I think at some point in the second one there was a scene about their Amityville investigation, but it's been quite a long time since I've seen that movie, and I can't really remember too much about it, but maybe that's another topic for another live stream, the Enfield poltergeist and what have you, or more modern horror movies and what have you. But either way, the stuff detailed about their investigation into the Amityville house is really interesting and does have some quite scary and interesting things about it. Did I not get that obsidian? Damn it. Let me just do... Why am I doing that? So whenever they went into the house to investigate it, which was after the Lutzes had moved out in, I think, January 1976, after only spending 28 days in it and what have you, the Warrens ended up investigating the place, and they were apparently scheduled to stay there a week, but because of what happened on the day that they went in, that plan turned into less than 24 hours. Ed apparently felt something press on his chest in the basement, and resulting to him not being able to breathe for a certain period of time. And Lorraine said she was being contacted at one point, so she had some kind of spiritualism medium to her. I don't know, and I haven't really heard that before until today. I think I may have heard that before, I'm not too sure, but either way, she said she was trying to be contacted, and two members of a film crew, she was in the presence of at the time, passed out as soon as she had said that, apparently, which is quite scary if true. But again, if this is all true, who knows? Obviously, something did happen for all of this to warrant such notoriety in the history of the paranormal and what have you, I would say. Like, what is real and what isn't real at the end of the day is the main thing when it comes to discussing cases of hauntings like this and what have you, I would have said. But at the same time, with how much popularity and notoriety this, I think notoriety may be the wrong word, but how popular and renowned this case has become for the world of the paranormal, surely something, at least a little bit of something, must have happened to trigger all of this. Surely there must have been something paranormal. Oh, there's some dogs are going apeshit outside. Sorry if you can hear that. Surely something must have happened slightly in terms of the paranormal for things to initiate in terms of these stories and what have you. Like, I find it ridiculous to think about that there was so many stories and what have you given about the Amityville house, and I kind of find it ridiculous that all of this has happened and at least not one of it is to be true, or in the very least something did happen to warrant all of these stories being made up and what have you. Like, what was the initiator for all of this stuff coming out about the house and what have you? I just find it very odd that all of it is a hoax in a way and what have you. Like, why would there be such, for lack of a better term, a cult of people creating this long history and complex interconnected story and what have you about these hauntings and events that supposedly happened at Amityville? Like, it at the same time, like, it seems ridiculous, a lot of the things that have happened there, particularly what Wendigoon detailed with the frickin' manuscript causing a car to crash twice, and then causing a house to burn down. Like, some of that is really ridiculous, but also at the same time I kind of find the concept of it all being a little fake, a little ridiculous as well, because again, why would there be such a huge cult of people, for lack of a better term, creating so much and what have you? in terms of stories. In regards to all of this, I just find it very strange that it would be at least one bit of it isn't real. If that were to be the case, I would find it a little strange, to say the least. There's something else here in terms of, but yeah, the Amityville haunting and what have you kind of made Ed and Lorraine Warren famous in terms of paranormal investigators and kind of renowned and what have you in the field of the paranormal. Let's see here. What am I trying to do? But obviously, if you're a horror fan and what have you, watching me, a fan of horror films, you most likely will have heard of the Amityville horror movies, at least one of them, because there's been so many over the years and what have you, but mainly the one from 1979 or the one from 79 is the most famous out of them all and what have you, and it's definitely become a horror movie franchise which has drawn some very good bits of criticism and what have you towards it, because to my understanding a lot of the films in it and what have you only use the Amityville bit as a marketing kind of thing, and the movies are only really connected in that way, like the actual contents of them and how tied to the actual Amityville events are really questionable, to my understanding of it all. And it does go into some really weird areas and what have you, like there is even, released in 2020, there was even an Amityville adult movie, which I'm going to be honest, I looked up on YouTube. It's called The Amityville Vibrator. Fortunately, I couldn't find a clip of it on YouTube. I kind of wanted to see a clip just because I'm so curious as to what the hell that would even be like. Just mainly out of curiosity, and I couldn't find a clip, but I did end up watching a video which was a review of the movie by two people, kind of short 4-minute review video on the movie, and these people were quite positive on the movie. I would have said, and I think they very briefly showed a bit of the movie, like one of the more showable scenes in it, which was still at the same time really graphic and really just trippy and strange. But whereas there was definitely things like that in the Amityville horror movie franchise, which I think totals 30 movies or something absolutely insane like that, mainly because the title in of itself is a marketing scheme, from what I have seen and what have you. At the same time, for as big of a franchise as it is in terms of size and all of the areas that are questionable, there is definitely some areas to it that are absolutely fantastic and do show some really good and interesting ideas. Admittedly, I've only seen the very first Amityville horror movie from 1979. I own it on DVD along with I have the DVDs here. Amityville 2, The Possession, and Amityville 3, with Amityville 1 being 79. The second one, which was really liked by a good friend of mine, which I need to get around to watching, is from 82, and only 83 for the third one, fittingly enough. So I'll definitely have to get around to watching those at some point. But then again, I've got tons of other things to watch as well, so who knows when that will happen. But there are definitely some areas where, from what I what I know about the franchise. See here. In terms of what I know about the franchise, there is definitely some interesting movies in it, and some where they are actually showing a bit of decent creativity and what have you. I believe it was one of the horror movies that did end up getting remade in the early 2000s, like a lot of the classic horror movies from the 70s did, like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, etc., etc., and even The Haunting slightly earlier in 1999, which was a remake of the 1963 film, which is one of my favourite horror movies of all time. And apparently, out of the kind of cluster and universe that is the horror movie remakes of that time period and what have you, it is meant to be one of the better movie remakes, even though it was, I think, at least produced by Michael Bay. I think, I could be wrong in that. I know Michael Bay was in some way related to that movie in terms of production, but quite what he did exactly, I'm not 100% certain. But it's meant to be one of the better horror movie remakes out there, even though it's apparently not a patch on the original 1979 one. But an interesting kind of pocket of the Amityville horror movie franchise was in the 1990s, I believe, where there was a series of 4 movies, straight to video or straight to DVD, or however you want to say it, Amityville movies, in which all 4 of them were about a particular item from the Amityville house that got possessed by the spirits of the place, and in turn those objects being moved elsewhere and what have you, and them causing the paranormal mayhem. For example, I think it's a really interesting one, and I believe all 4 got a Blu-ray series a little while ago, which looks quite good, Blu-ray releases. But no, they did things like the Amityville clock and various things like that. And whereas I'm not too sure on the quality of those movies and generally how well they are received and what have you, I do think at the same time that was a really cool kind of idea and what have you of those filmmakers or whoever made those movies. Not necessarily doing a haunted house movie, but taking an object from the haunted house itself and making a horror movie out of that, I find really interesting kind of concept and what have you to do. That's a bit better. And yeah, I really do kind of applaud that creativity and think that's a really unique and interesting idea of going about a supernatural horror movie, and quite a unique one. I haven't really heard of much of anything like that done before, and don't think I've seen very many direct-to-DVD films anyway. The only ones that come to mind are the Phantasm films, which I have watched, and maybe something for me to talk about at some point in the future. But in terms of the one Amityville horror movie that I have watched, the Amityville Haunting, is it? Or no, that's a more recent one. The Amityville Horror, the only one that I've watched. I think that's an absolutely fantastic classic of the haunted house genre of horror movies. And whereas it's been a couple years since I have seen it, it's been a few years since I've seen it, my memories of it are very strong, and I do remember it being, in terms of like haunted house movies, I would definitely put it up there with the likes of The Haunting, 1963, and Kubrick's The Shining. And I think it's an absolutely incredible haunted house movie. And whereas it wasn't the main focus for this video here today, I did end up watching clips of it on YouTube. I think by the MGM movie, official movie YouTube channel. They did a kind of 8 to 10 minute compilation of the best scenes from the Amityville Horror 1979, and some of it is genuinely quite scary, I would have said, and there are definitely some really chilling and creepy moments to it, I would say. And in terms of accuracy to the supposed true events that happened to inspire the movie, I would have said it was an extremely well researched and accurate telling, cinematic retelling of the Amityville events and what have you that supposedly happened. Although it does bring in more conflicts into the story, because I've heard several people associable with the actual events that the movie was based on say that the movie was largely a piece of Hollywood, and a lot of it was kind of like a product of Hollywood, and a lot of it was exaggerated and what have you, which I find odd, because in a lot of the clips that I watched on YouTube courtesy of that MGM compilation, I found it to be very accurate, and accurate in terms of the events that I was made aware of in the documentary, because there was a lot of events described in that documentary that I had watched that were actually happening in those scenes in the movie. Like, you had obviously they're all kind of, some of them was all kind of slightly altered and what have you, I guess for reasons of the script maker or screenwriters of the movie. And there is some kind of slight changes and what have you, but the likes of Melissa's imaginary friend, the demon eyes of the weird creature that they were seeing are all in there. God, they are loud. Are all kind of in there and what have you, along with like oozing from the walls and what have you, and oozing from the toilet, which sounds gross, but the strange kind of substance coming out the toilet was an interesting kind of detail. That was, I didn't hear anything about in the documentaries and what have you that I watched, but I guess was kind of a riff on the story of the Lutzes seeing oozing of strange unexplainable substances on their walls and what have you. I guess that was kind of a twist on that part of the Amityville narrative, but overall, and from what I remember of it, I would say that it is among the absolute best of the haunted house genre of horror movies and what have you, and I think it's absolutely incredible. And as I said, I didn't rewatch it in preparation for this video, but we'd watch clips of it on YouTube, and overall, from what I have seen and been able to assess and observe, it seems to have been a very accurate screen transcription or transcribing of the apparent real events that happened at the Amityville house. And as I said, absolutely incredible horror film, and it is easily one of the best haunted house movies I have ever seen, up there with The Shining and The Haunting from 1963, which is one of my all-time favourite horror movies and what have you. And with it being a massive fan of the supernatural horror genre and ghost stories in general, that is obviously kind of a big genre that interests me and what have you. And there's so many of those kind of types of movies out there and what have you that I have watched and are really interesting, and there's several more that I know about that I would like to watch, but at the same time are kind of sometimes pieces of lost media. Like I've often described, or sometimes described, the late night horror episode The Triumph of Death as being my most wanted to be returned piece of lost media, which was a adaptation of an H. Russell Wakefield story of the same name, and I believe it is the only adaptation currently only screen adaptation of one of that author's stories that hit the screen. And from the little guidebook that I have about late night horror, and reading that and thoroughly examining it and enjoying it, it's easily kind of gone up there in the rankings of one of my most wanted pieces of lost media, not to mention, for various different reasons, not to mention that the cast is absolutely fantastic. Like, the main character of Amelia Lauren was played by Claire Bloom, who was one of the lead girls in The Haunting. And then we also had Robert James in it, who Doctor Who fans will know as couple roles in the series, whether it be the High Priestess in The Mask of Mandragora, I think, or the more popular and well-known appearance of his being the Power of the Daleks, the Patrick Troughton opener. But from reading the book and what have you on this show, that seems to have been absolutely incredible and very scary little ghost story, and one that I would absolutely love to see return to the television archives someday, however unlikely that may be. And it has some fantastic imagery in it from what I have read, such as, I think, Amelia hearing screams and what have you, possibly seeing the phantoms of the murdered children manifesting in the home that she's in, the Carwaif mansion, I think it is, and other details given in the story, such as bloodied handprints appearing on walls, which I would have really liked to have seen how the BBC did that, and is kind of a sign of how experimental that particular show, Late Night Horror, was, as it was the first regularly broadcasted colour series to be made by the BBC. And it was quite experimental in that regard. It really kind of seemed to take pride in the fact that it was the first colour series, regularly broadcasted colour series, to be made by the BBC, and experimented quite a bit with the use of colour in various episodes, which I've previously talked about in a documentary of mine on YouTube. And obviously there's all sorts of other famous to slightly more uncommon haunted house movies that are quite interesting, or ones I may like to watch at some point, whether it be House from the 1970s in Japan, which is meant to be a really kind of psychedelic and strange movie, to other episodes of Lost television, like there's several episodes of the Mystery and Imagination series, or all of that series I would like to see back, but there's several episodes of that that fit into the haunted house genre, like the Beckoning Shadow from series 2, which was meant to be absolutely fantastic and have some quite striking imagery in it. And at the end of the day, with all of the kind of sea of haunted house movies and haunted house pieces of television that there is out there, I think the Amityville horror will stand the test of time as being one of the absolute best in the genre, and one that I can easily come back to and watch again and again, even if it's been several years that I have seen it. But I think I have rambled on long enough and talked about various things and kind of went off topic slightly towards the end. But we've got a few good things done today. Kind of finished my starter house. Made an automatic cobblestone generator, and trying to get this nether portal lit with this unusual method that does work. But otherwise, like, favorite, comment, subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream, and goodbye.